Hi folks, my name's Alex. I'm going to talk about how to play Disc Priest on Mythic Mekkatorque. So first things first, talents are pretty self-explanatory. You want to, pretty much on every boss, you want to be using these three. Um, you don't care about this talent most of the time, but on Mekkatorque it's actually very useful to have Shining Force because you can knock the robots if your Death Knight's DC, or maybe you don't even have them in the first place and you're having to do some other crazy tactic. So it's always handy to have an extra knock here, and Fear is useless on this fight, so definitely take Shining Force. As for the 75 trait, a lot of Disc Priests now are running Shadow Covenant. Um, Personally think it's a really bad talent for an abundance of reasons. Um, you lose out on damage, you have this log padding kind of attitude. Well, most of the people running it have this log padding attitude that, oh, it's better on logs, it must be better, when logs don't count the healing absorb, which is kind of painful. So, I mean, that's 50% of the heal almost as a healing absorb, so yeah, anyway. Either way, Shadow Covenant and Sins are pretty close in HPS throughput, and given that situation, in my opinion, there is no reason not to take Sins because you're not there for your healing throughput, you're there to kill the boss. And your damage is a big part of that, and there's no reason not to have this extra damage from Sins, which you don't gain from Shadow Covenant. So, to summarize that, Shadow Covenant, really bad talent on almost any situation, in my opinion. Sins of the Many is brilliant, and I would take it in any boss in this tier. Every boss in this tier. So, this tier, Purge the Wicked against Halo is kind of a choice in a lot of places. On this boss, it's Purge the Wicked 100% because Halo will AoE the ads, and it will cause that splashback damage. And if there's 3 ads up, a new Halo, it's going to chunk your HP. I don't think it kills you straight up, but if you're low health, you're dead. And there's no reason to be taking extra damage on progress. So 100% take Purge the Wicked. And of course, the final tier is Evangelism. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about like the overview of the fight, what you bring to it as a Disc Priest, and what you should be aiming to do. To give myself some credibility, as always though, here is our kill of Mekkatorque Mythic. So on the 5th of February, World 67, so hopefully that gives some credibility. And just to prove I was actually there, there we go, there's me. So the log that I'm going to use for this video as well, just to, again to make it obvious that I was pulling my weight on the fight, not just fucking got carried. There's my healing throughput. For my gear it was rank 1. So yeah, hopefully that gives an idea. Anyway, why'd you bring a Disc Priest to this boss? One thing is our damage. Disc Priest is doing really solid HPS, but also providing a lot of DPS right now, which other healers don't bring. Always a solid reason to bring them, not specific to Mekkatorque though. So one thing we really excel at on this fight is our ability to heal targets who get the Gigavolt Charge and Gigavolt Blast. Because they go out of range and out of line of sight a lot, other healers are not so great at healing them, particularly Shamans, Monks, and Paladins, and Holy Priests. Druids are decent, they can get a good few hots on them before they go, but Disc and Druids are definitely up there between the top 2 at healing these targets. So here's our first kill, or sorry, that kill from the log that I showed, and this is the healing done to targets with Gigavolt Charge and Gigavolt Blast. So you can see I'm miles ahead of other healers. Now, it's not necessarily their fault for not playing right, because their classes just don't excel at this, but keeping these targets alive is the primary concern of this boss fight. If you can keep these targets alive, then you'll be in a much better position to kill this boss. Okay, so I'm going to use the video on my channel, the Mekkatorque kill video, so if you do want to check this out yourself, it's there. As always, I will tell you exactly how I use my cooldowns, and I think it's a really good way to go, but of course, if you think you have a better way, this is by no means 100% the way to go, the only way to play. You can play this a lot of different ways. But yeah, this is the approach I take to the boss. Now, I'll talk through the fights. I'll talk through the fight phase by phase. I would recommend getting an Innervate for this one because it's a long fight, and if you want to be able to use your Disc to the full potential here, with an Innervate you won't need to hold back on mana really at all, which is really nice, and it's also really fun to play like that. If you can't get an Innervate, you will need to conserve a bit more. And particularly in phase 1, the healing is quite irrelevant to a certain extent, especially if you're 5 healing this. We 4 healed on this pool, and a lot of people did 4 heal as well at the start of progress, but most guilds I imagine will be 5 healing this. for the remainder of the tier because the damage check is not just as tight anymore with the gearing. So, as I say, try and get yourself an Innervate. 1 is plenty. With 1 you will really not need to worry about mana at all. So yeah, let's jump in. Alright, so first thing I mentioned is the weak auras in this fight. I used quite a few myself. I will put some sort of link in the description of this to get them. If you have any questions about how they work or why I have them, then feel free to ask as well. A lot of them I made myself, so I think I do have a decent understanding of what weak auras you should be using on this fight. Now, gonna just jump into the fight then, and I'll talk it through as we go. So we're pulling 3-pot damage and immediately start DPSing. Now there's nothing happening for the first 10 seconds of this, so you can atonement the tanks and just full time DPS. Now you can also use your Schism on the pull. I didn't, but hey, that's kind of a min-maxing thing there. It's not really got that much impact. So you get the first Gigavolt charges. Now, as I mentioned, you're really good at healing these targets. You want to get them as a priority. Now, the way I play it and the way I use my cooldowns is I Rapture immediately when these go out, and I Rapture Shield all of them, and in the tank as well, before going back to DPSing. But here, because it's the combo coming up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a full ramp up and Shadow Fiend and Barrier. Now the reason for this is the phase 1 it's not very hard to heal at all. You don't really need to worry about really good cooldown timing. So I'm just trying to use everything effectively by having it on cooldown, because of course a spell that's on cooldown is getting value, a spell that's not on cooldown is not. So I take the Innervate here, and I would really recommend making sure you have an Innervate, because it's a huge help in this fight because it's so long and you really benefit from it as a Disc Priest. So I get the Rapture, I do some Rapture Shields, I take the Innervate, I finish my Rapture, and then I'll ramp up completely. So let's play. Getting the targets with the Gigavolt debuff shielded, and now I take the Innervate and I'm just shielding other targets as well. So then the double Radiance comes out, and you need to make sure you get this off before this Wormhole Generator, otherwise it really fucks up your ramp because it just interrupts it completely. And you also need to be free to Dispel. So there we go, the ramp's finished, 16 atonements is fine, and Shadow Fiend is out. So this Wormhole Generator is always followed by a Crashdown, so we let it finish. We need to Dispel here. There we go, it's done. Maybe need to Life Grip. Turns out on this one I didn't, and then this Blast Off's coming down. Now, it's really important that you save your Schism for when this lands. Okay, you don't want to Schism him in the air, because you want the Schism hit to do effective healing, because the Schism hit is huge. So use some filler damage spells. I use a Penance here while he's flying, that's fine. And then you want to time the Schism. Like, I can start casting the Schism now, I'll probably cast it when the Penance finishes. So there we go, there's a Schism, and then continue DPS while dodging this Burst Cannon. Now these targets with the Gigavolt Blast are really good targets for your Atonement as well. It gets really good value because it'll never overheal pretty much on these targets, unless your other healers really pump some heals into them. So the next round the bombs are out now, again Atonement them and go back to DPSing. And the way this boss goes is you get one big combo with the Wormhole Generator Crashdown, then you get 2 Crashdowns without the Wormhole Generator, and then you're back to the Wormhole Generator again. So timings look a bit dodgy, but I think this is a bigwig's bug just now. So here's a Crashdown. Now on every Crashdown you want to use Radiances, okay, there's really good value there. So here's me pre-casting the Radiance, and you also want to Schism again on that timing when he lands, so the Schism damage hits after the raid damage does. So here we go, there's a Radiance out. I did a Smite just to make sure my Schism would hit, and there's the Schism, and continue to DPS. Now you have the Shrink thing here, so just make sure you stand still. It's really rare you get Shrunk as a healer, but it does happen. I think it happened to me 3 times in the whole of Progress. So just be ready for it if it does, make sure you know what you're doing. But I don't think I got it in this video at all, so probably won't need to deal with it much as a healer, but hey, be ready for it, and make sure you don't move if you're not Shrunk. And you can hear them shouting the marks in the background there as well. So continue. If there's blast targets that are not in the robots, keep them atoned, keep the tank atoned, continue DPSing. and make sure you're getting good value out of the atonements that you have out. Now I should have an atonement on the tank here, but I messed up. So there's more bombs. Again, get atonements on all of them immediately. I need to refresh atonement here, but I think I've missed it. We also have a crash down here, so I did a Radiance, which I just finished casting, into Schism. I'm back to DPSing after. Now I really should have got an atonement on him, but that's a fuck up from me there. So, Rapture came back up, and as I said earlier, we want to use the cooldowns efficiently here. So, popping Rapture immediately and shielding the blast targets as well as the tanks. Because Rapture is never going to overheal, or I mean, the shield is never going to not be used, I should say, on these targets. It's always going to be consumed in that 15 seconds, so it's really, really good value to use. And of course, tanks are really good targets for Rapture shields as well. So here, Evangelism's back up. I'm going to do like a smaller ramp up with just the one Radiance. Now that is just because it's back up on the cooldown. I might as well use my cooldowns efficiently. Evangelism's really mana efficient, and this is a really long fight. So we get some good efficiency out here, and I know there's a blast off coming. And this is the combo one with the wormhole generator. As I say, it goes wormhole generator combo, blast off, and then there's another blast off standalone, and then another blast off standalone, and then the combo again. So it's a cycle of 4. Now I need to make sure I dispel here. That's always a priority, is dispelling these people as soon as this wormhole generator ends. And make sure you have some sort of wee card like this one that tells you there's still one on the raid and your dispel is still not used. You can see I'm mousing over him ready. I'm about to dispel him. But it's really important that you don't think you dispelled when you didn't, essentially, here, because anyone who plays healer will know that when you dispel someone without a debuff on them, your dispel gets used and it doesn't trigger the cooldown. So it's really easy here to think, oh, I did my dispel, it's on cooldown now, I don't need to worry. But a lot of the time what happens here is your other healers will dispel as well, and you won't notice that they got it 0.1 seconds before you did. You still dispelled that target, and now you think your dispel is done. So a lot of the time it happened for us, especially in our early pools, is we'd leave someone in a sheep, and if they're in a sheep, they're just dead. They're a sheep in the middle of this, and there's no way they can get out. So really important to make sure you have something that tells you your dispel is used and it's on cooldown and you can continue playing. There's 3 debuffs. Now we used 5 healers, so it's a lot easier with 5 healers, but if you're using 4 healers, again, you can only have 1 healer not dispel at this point. You think you have about 2 seconds total to get this off, so they can still move out. This is a mage, so he can blink, sure, but if, say, it's on a shaman or someone without any, or a priest even, without any mobility, or with poorer mobility, then it's really important to get that off as soon as possible. If you do miss a global and you have to recast it, that's absolutely fine. Just make sure you do it instantly and they'll still be able to live. So I've got my 15 atonements out. He's about to do a crash down. I've got my Schism ready and I should be casting it. There we go. Following out with damage. Now I've got an atonement on this guy, which is great because he's miles away, out of range. No one else can heal him right now, and he's not even that high health. So it's important I continue to pump damage at this point, because that is going to funnel into healing him. And if I didn't have that, he might be a risk of dying from this. So he came out on 30% or so with an atonement on him, so that could have been a lot worse if he didn't have that atonement. That's really where the value from disc comes in this fight. So, at this point, there's not very much going on. Now, there's a timer saying wormhole generator here, but it's another bigwig's error. It doesn't actually happen. You'll get to 40% without another wormhole, which is nice. So at this point, you're kind of more free to do whatever you want. You want to drink at some point here. I'll talk about that in a moment. And there's no bombs in the raid here at all, so like it's just the bot damage you're healing. It's quite okay. We have another blast off here, so I should do a radiance or even 2. Yeah, I'm going to use 2 here. It's just fine. Maybe it wasn't necessary, but they will be up for when I need them. So, boss on 44%. We have a transition at 40. I think I'll drink in just a second, but you can also drink at the intermission start, because there's nothing really going on there as well. So it's kind of up to you whenever you drink here. I should make a note on the mechanics of the fight as well. So this spark bot 8, you can skip that. If you do, it does reduce your raid damage a bit, and it makes phase 2 a little less complicated. Sorry, the intermission a little less complicated, because you'll have one less bot to deal with. So if you skip it, it's nice, but you don't have to. And you also can skip the next bombs that are coming out too. Now skipping the bombs is a lot of help because it makes the intermission a lot easier. But of course, if you do get them, you can handle it, and as a Disc Priest, you're in a good position to do that. So there's my mana drink going off. Nothing really happening here. Only one robot as well, so raid damage is minimal. And we're phasing just there. Alright, so as I mentioned, we do get these bombs, which is a pain in the ass. But I did get atonements on them, which is fine. Now, I opted to make the play of using 3 innervates this fight. You could also go for using 2. Of course, using 3 is better because you get an extra innervate, but it forces you to use them almost on cooldown, so it kind of takes you into using them at suboptimal times in some positions. So here I've got an innervate. I have radiances available, and you kind of always want to use those radiances when the innervate's up because it's really, really mana efficient to not spend mana, of course. That kind of goes without saying, I guess. So I'm radiancing when there's no real damage here, but there is a few robots out, so these will get some value for essentially for free. I won't really talk about the mechanics of intermission. It's not really the point of my video. This is kind of more aimed at the healing aspect. So I use my radiance here. I'm not evangelizing. Just wanted to get that value from the innervate. So here's some more bombs coming out. Now, the reason you want to skip the first bombs when you go into the intermission is because if you don't get them, you don't have to deal with this debuff, and somehow the other debuff, maybe summon immunity, the last one. So when you enter the intermission, the first set of bombs that are out now of the intermission are on a fixed timer. So it doesn't matter if you push when you get bombs like we did, you'll still get these bombs on that set timing. So they're actually closer together than other sets of bombs, which does make it slightly harder to deal with. Either way, get your atonements out on these targets, and then continue DPSing the boss. And of course you can DPS the boss through the shield as a Disc Priest. It'll not do full damage, but it will do full healing. So you need to give some attention to dodging here. Prioritize dodging over healing, really, because no one will die at short notice. Particularly as long as they play their characters properly. If they do die at short notice, they've 100% stood in something, and hey, that's their fault, not yours. So we have one wormhole generator in this phase. Now I've ramped up for it, and you can see. So I'm just going to jump back a bit because I actually didn't talk about that. So I lead this ramp up with a rapture, put lots of shields out, then double radiance, and then evangelism as kind of normal ramp up. So there's the evangelism out. Now this is all before the timing, which Bigwigs doesn't seem to be announcing. That might be fixed now in Bigwigs, but I did have this timing written down from previous kills or logs or whatever. So we'll finish the ramp up. Here comes the wormhole shortly, not without the bombs first. And it's really important you don't move if you're not shrunk at this point as well, otherwise you'll trample people. So give them a few seconds to get out and then move. But it can be tricky here because you've got a lot to focus on. You've got your positioning, you've got your atonements on the targets that have the bombs, which I actually kind of overlooked here. You've got to dispel, and you've got to continue DPSing through this big ramp up with all these atonements, otherwise you get no value out of them. So here's a teleport coming in. I look for the dispel, I do it, I move out, and you have to dodge a sheep, of course, as well. So here it would have been really good while I run to pop some shields on the bomb targets. Now I didn't do that, but if you're here and you have the focus to do that, then good for you. You're a better player than I was here. So you should try and aim for that, but there's a lot to avoid, a lot that can kill you at this point, and a lot that can kill other people. So just as long as you get out of this alive, you're in a really good spot. On these, as soon as these targets are back, I should be focusing on making sure they stay alive. But they were actually quite healthy here, which was probably credit to the other healers and maybe their own personals. Even still, he came out at 50%. You saw he nearly died from that crash down. Went to 4% there, so that just shows the importance of having atonements out on time on these targets before they go out of line of sight and range. Anyway, that point is where you want to use like a rally or an aura mastery or something, because this crash down is really painful, and as you see, we very almost lost someone there. We used a revival as well. So just get through this with 20 people alive and you're in a really good spot for killing this boss. So we have some sheep exploding here. Now we want to move back to position while dodging the sheep, while making sure no one dies. But again, prioritize your survival over your raid survival, because if people die at this point, they probably fucked up themselves. So I'll pause here just while we go into phase 3 and just split the record. Alright, so phase 3 entry. Now I use my intermission, my ramp up in the intermission, so I don't have it for the first big combo. But the combo follows the same rules as phase 1. We get a wormhole generator crash down combo, and then 2 crash downs, and then another wormhole generator combo. So it's really important you survive the first one, and it's difficult. So you want to use cooldowns for it. Now we had a lot of cooldowns from our other healers. You'll be able to see them pop up on the left here when it goes off. But I didn't use a cooldown here other than barrier. So keeping your atonements out on these targets is really important. And we use it also on Ankh Totem here as well, just in case things went wrong. Now I actually messed up quite bad here. I should have had atonements on all 3 of these, but I had none. So do that better when you come to this boss. Make sure you have atonements on those targets when they run out, because this is a really, really scary point, and keeping those targets high health is really, really important. So here's the wormhole generator coming. It's the first combo. Now again, get sucked in, look for the dispel, do the dispel, then move out, and I also have to grip our shaman here because he's knocked up in the air. So I'll do that, and I'll also drop my barrier here. And you want to try and get as many people in as possible. This is my barrier area here. Maybe it could have been better used over here, but I was generally using it on this area all the time because that's where the ranged were running, mostly. So the barrier needs to be down for the crash down. You also, of course, want to make sure you don't barrier inside the crash down, because then it's a complete waste. So focus here is to keep these people alive, debuff targets. Our warrior is in real trouble right now, but I do have an atonement on him, and that was me just gripping the shaman down. So you dodge everything here. Now this is really tricky because there's a wormhole generator into crash down, into buster cannon with sheeps going off. So it's really, really scary. At worst, you want to tank. If you have to tank something, you want to tank one of the flames, because that necessarily doesn't kill you. It is quite easy to heal through, and obviously the buster cannon, you're pretty much dead if you take it. So ideally stay in the CDs. I could have been standing in this barrier and link, which would have been a smarter play, but I wasn't too worried about my health because I was quite high. So we do lose someone here, which kind of sucks, but he did tank a flame and die from that. So not really on the healers for people's tanking and stuff, but I think in this situation we could have saved him if we'd focused a little bit more on the spot heals. So let's continue. Now the next things coming are 2 crash downs before the big combo. Now my plan for this, from fight planning, was to use my evangelism ramp up combo on the final wormhole generator. Now what I actually did in the moment, because we had 20 people alive, which was really nice, I actually used it on a crash down before then, just because if we kept 20 people alive up until the wormhole generator with 4 healers, we're going to be on like 1% boss health when it comes in, which means it doesn't really matter if we live through it or not. We'll let dots and the survivors finish it off. So here you can pretty much use your radiances when you want, because it's always going to be good value, but you want to make sure you have 2 for your ramp up, of course. You want to make sure you rapture at a smart time when the shields aren't going to go to waste. Here you can see lots of bombs out, lots of low health people with crash, with blast debuff, and generally at this point with 4 robots, even just putting a rapture shield on a random raid member is a good choice, because they're most likely going to take enough damage to break it. And of course, using a rapture, it's a good rapture if your shields are absorbed. It's not a good rapture if they tick off. So focusing on keeping these targets alive. Now I should have an atonement on this guy. There we go. And then we're back to DPSing. We have a crash down here, and I should use one of my radiances on it. Hopefully do that. I think this one's a little bit late, this radiance. It should have been, it could have been earlier. I think I'm about to do it now. It's probably a bit scared of my mana at this point, but that's kind of unjustified because I used that second innervate in the intermission. I still have an innervate to come, but it will be quite late into the fight. So being at this point isn't really an issue because it's not far away from my next enemy. So there we go. I use a double radiance, and then I evangelism. Now there's a crash down coming shortly, or blast off, whatever. It's the same spell at the end of the day. It's just a combo. So I want to top these people off. That's why I've used it slightly early. I could have pushed it 10 seconds, and I also could have pushed it to the last combo. Especially good to do that if you're 5 healing, and you don't have particularly high DPS, because then you will need to live through that combo to kill the boss. But here I knew that if we pushed through this blast off and we lived, then we'd be fine, because it's on 10%, and it's quite a while still to the wormhole. So that's why I use my evangelism early, but the choice is yours as to which one you want to do, dependent on your strategy. So here we go, we've got another crash down. I have a radiance that when I get some mana for, I will be able to do it. And at this point, it's pretty much just stay alive. And you may have heard the call there to suicide the debuffs. We use this strategy. If you were in any doubt that you were going to die on the run over, then you just suicide behind the nearest pillar. And I would recommend doing something similar as well. Because if you run across the room and end up dying from raid damage from the debuff, then you'll wipe the raid, or you'll give yourself a real hard time. Especially in this phase, unless the boss is on like 1 or 2% and you get an explosion on the raid, you're pretty dead, because the raid damage is really high. So there's the innovate coming in, and I'm really scared at this point, so I'm just immediately going into radiances. Just to top people off as soon as possible, because everyone is super low there. So there's my double radiant sight now, and this is Schism coming. And this is the really hard combo now. So we have a lot of robots, we have a wormhole generator, followed by a crash down, followed by a buster cannon, with sheep exploding at the same time. So it's really difficult to survive this. And I think I actually die here as well, which is a mistake on my part, but I think I was probably a little bit flustered with the boss being on 1% health. So here we go. Going into the wormhole generator, of course, as usual, first thing you look for is the dispel. And you can probably notice I'm really low health here as well. I was terrified at this point. But we look for the dispel. You can see my dispel's on cooldown, so I did get one, but I do end up dead just from the damage here. So either way, boss is dead. We did lose a shit ton of people to this combo. As I say, it's really hard to deal with, and because I used my evangelism early, I made that choice to try and survive the previous crash down. Then we didn't have adequate healing cooldowns to survive that. That doesn't mean to say you can't survive it if your strategy is using 5 healers and also you have a low DPS. But I would imagine the majority of kills will not really need to deal with that because of the gearing as we go on. Well, I hope that's been of use to you, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop a message in the comments and I'll do my best to get back to you. Cheers!